actually think it's a good thing we're recording, because I think we just went live, because I don't know. I don't know what's up with my. You know, it's snowing here, so maybe that's the issue. Is it snowing?
Your internet goes down.
Is it snowing there, Mark?
That's what happens when you live in the country, Tim.
Yeah, apparently. No, I'm actually gonna close this over here, and we'll see if we get. I don't know. We'll see if
there you go.
Better.
You're better. You're better.
Is that better? Is that better?
Yeah,
okay. All right. I'm really puzzled, because my internet's usually very fast. A friend of mine actually I was talking with. He's a missionary over in Thailand. He gets 500 MEPs up and down.
Wait, from Thailand? Well,
in
Asia's
Thailand,
pretty good.
In
Thailand,
Asia's
pretty
good.
Yeah.
500 up and down. Now I get supposedly Comcast will give me 1,200 down. I don't have a modem with the, I don't know, appropriate technology to support all that.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't get anything close to that up. My upstream's maybe
same thing
80, something like that. But he's getting 500. You know what he's paying a month for it?
What's that?
$13.
Oh my gosh! Wow, that is
$13. And he tells me that when you get internet over in Thailand, it's fiber.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
With those speeds, of course, it's fiber. It's fiber, and if you switch providers, they just go out and cut the fiber that's going to you. Whoever others, the last provider's fiber optic, go to wherever their distribution hub is.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I'm not up to speed on what the fiber optic switch stuff looks like anyway. And they just run more fiber, like a fiber line to your house. He says there are cables that are huge because they're just zip tying another fiber to it. It's like these massive things. He said they don't even have to put like the ladders on a telephone pole like we would do here.
Did they just run along the street?
No, they just lean the ladders against the cable. Because the cable going from pole to pole is so big, because you want to run another line? Okay, we'll just zip tie another cable to this thing and just run it to your house directly, and that's good. So these cables are so massively, they just adding, they're growing outside. It's like a rubber band ball of internet.
But that's a good deal. Only $13. I don't want to say what I pay for Service Electric's.
Oh, you're on Service Electric?
Because of the community I live in an HOA community.
Oh, do you not have any other option?
They lock down the cable provider. I don't know how long contract they have with them or how long they extend it. They don't give us that information. We're like prisoners. We're locked in with Service Electric. We don't pay for their TV cable. We just pay for just internet. So I pay for the most expensive internet I can get from them, which is a gigabyte down. That's what they advertise. Go to speed test. It's usually around but between 700 and 800.
Sometimes it depends on your devices too, as to whether or not,
Well, since I did the house rebuild, I have Ethernet running through the whole house. So that helps a lot. So I had the internet, I had the modem going in right as the line comes into the house. I had the internet modem, and then I have a rack of a rack where I keep the router and the switch and everything like that. So everything's kind of really close to where the source is. And then it runs pretty good. And then usually the download, I don't have too many issues with being 700, 800, if I do the speed test. But upload the same thing. For some reason, they limit, I think it's like 50 megabytes up now. I think that's probably like the highest they can give, even if that, it's usually around like 30 or 20. And it's like, really? It's like so many applications, rely on having a good upstream. And
now, since everybody's working remote, right? Yeah, like it used to be. Download. You're watching Netflix. You're playing. But you're playing games. You need the upstream.
Yeah.
Maybe not as much because you're one input, and then you expect a lot of inputs down from a multiplayer game. But you still need the upstream for that. It'd be so much. I would love to have that, especially if I like to do my PC remotely to work. Right. If I want to do some development, I'll connect to the IDE that's running on my desktop remotely, and it's on the upstream, because then from the perspective of my client, it is the downstream.
But since you're using PHP Storm, it just works like butter wherever you use it, right?
No, not all the time. But that's due to the internet. Actually, their gateway product, which allows you to remotely connect to it. And I'm glad you brought up PHP Storm, because we haven't talked about it for some time. And we bring up PHP every episode because, hey, that's the only thing I can relate to you about Tim, right. So I'm glad you brought it up.
Well, you did the PHP or the JetBrains Spaces, right? We talked about that. I was curious about that.
Spaces. Yeah.
Have you used that anymore?
I started an account. I haven't played with it much, but the whole idea of Spaces is you run the IDE remotely, so you run it on their cloud. But that's the same thing I'm kind of doing. I'm running it though remotely on my dev system. So when I connect to it, I have the same file structure. This is like where I normally work, and it's a piece of cake.
Is it projected to you like through like a terminal like window or application or through the browser? What is it?
So they have a couple different technologies that I'm playing with. One is Projector, which my understanding, again, this is just like what I'm reading from their consumer-facing documents. Projector takes the UI layer that JetBrains has, because JetBrains, I believe, has its own like UI kit to allow you to build IDEs, really, and but whatever applications they're building, they have a UI kit. And Projector, I think, takes their UI kit and puts it in a web browser. So you can basically say, that is where I'm going to see it. So you can use Projector to do that. Take a running instance of the IDE and kind of project it. But that is not... That struggled for me, it seemed to struggle when I used it, because it seemed to get confused about the relative size of what I was projecting to and the actual IDE that was running on my computer, because it is running. Yeah. So it's projecting it's running the UI someplace, then projecting it to you. But what you do there, you should see here, because you're running it as a projection, and sizes were different. I've had UI elements get big, small, big, small. It wouldn't quite know what to do. Yeah. Gateway, I think, uses some of the same technology, but it is running headless on the server side.
Okay.
So it's not as if I am running it and duplicating the display in two different places. It's running headless, and that's very much the model of using a remote X server, which I also did. I set up X on Windows to connect via SSH to my desktop, and then run Storm, but say use the X server that's local to me. So basically run the UI on this computer that I'm remotely. So I basically treated my laptop as a thin client, from way back in the day. And that worked okay too. It had problems with multiple windows, and I think that's just a deficiency of whatever library I was using on Windows to be an X server. But Gateway is like the same concept. It's just all packaged together from JetBrains, and it seems to work really nice. So as long as I can SSH into my desktop, I can run the IDE remotely, headless, and then see it, on the device that I'm connecting with.
Yeah, and so much of that, what you just talked about with if you don't have a good UI experience when you're either doing some type of terminal projection or some type of remote connecting to get back a user interface, if it doesn't project well within your resolution of your screen, that's a big hindrance, which I could assume could also be a challenge. That wants to be an interesting technical challenge. They're trying to make it smooth as possible to make sure it translates well from where it's actually being generated and then where it's being how it's being received.
Right, and that's why I want a better upstream. Yeah, because I'm now when I connect remotely, that is the blocker. It's how fast my desktop can upload whatever it needs to the upstream to get back to my client device. So
one thing I wanted to mention to you before we get on our big tangents and we start talking about things I don't even have on my list, which I do actually have a show topic list now, Tim.
Is this the Twitters? Because
it's not the Twitters.
On the Twitters, Mark said it takes the patience of a Jedi not to tell TJ Lytle that I have discovered something before Dev Friday show. And I got to say, all this week I've been like, I cannot wait to hear Mark tell me what he discovered about Emacs.
Exactly, because we
has to be something
our weekly
you found with
Emacs segment. Maybe we can avoid talking about PHP ugly.
We need
we have to have it. We have to have an Emacs segment.
We need a jingle. It's like da 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 da. Mark and Emacs da 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 da. Go.
I'm not going to rehash the whole back and forth. Well, first thing, I did get Emacs running better on Windows. My Doom Emacs. I had to trim the libraries down because I probably was loading in some libraries that didn't really work well on Windows. So I trimmed those down, rebuilt it a couple times. It's still not as fast as my Surface Go with Pop OS.
Yeah.
That's still fast. And I honestly, now my Surface Go is the perfect notebook. I love it. I love taking it to the coffee shop now, or if I have to take the kids someplace and I take it with me, it's great. It's like the perfect laptop. I'm so happy with it, because the other reason why it makes me happy is having Doom Emacs with the org agenda. And org agenda has changed my life and how I keep my notes, my notebooks, how I track everything. and it's so elegant. Like I didn't believe these YouTubers when they were talking about it and how great it was, because it's basically just a text-based agenda built into it,
like
built into a text editor
for text people, right?
But once you get to the flow and the key bindings and kind of get into your workflow, and the one thing I discovered this week, which I discovered Saturday, Sunday, that's when I tweeted that, because remember last show I talked about the one thing it's missing is the ability to have it on my phone.
Right. Well, yeah. You can't run Emacs on your phone, so you can't sync it.
What I was doing between my desktop and my Surface Go laptop, I was just using a Git repo, which, getting a good pattern of that with Terminal, just do commits and pushes because they're basically just text files, right? So but it was like, how can I get this to my phone? So I searched on the App Store for just org or org agenda of what came up. Orgzilla. Orgzilla.
Of course.
So an Android app, and it's only an Android app. They don't have an iOS version, which I'm totally fine with, because the other thing I also found interesting about this app is not only how great it is, actually it's simplistic. It basically gives you a lot of the same functions that you have. It does do syncing, which actually it does do syncing through Dropbox. So now I switched from a Git repo to just a Dropbox folder, and that works great. So now I can have it's syncing between my computers and then my phone now. And I have now my agenda, and it works with notifications. It's like, and you know me, I'm not a big app guy when it comes to installing a lot of apps on my phone. And if I'm going to install an app on my phone, it's got to be meaningful. It's got to do a lot for me. It's got to make it worthwhile to be an installed app on my phone. Also, I want to make sure that's not tracking me and, keep my information. So the other thing I found interesting about Orgzilla, it's an open source native application. So I was curious about this. Have you ever used any, or on your phone, purely open source, free applications that have a GitHub repo that you could fork if you wanted to, and do your own project, or you could submit pushes to, and then I guess the maintainer of that will then push it, because it is an Android application. It's a native Android app built in Android Studio, Java-based application.
Right.
So but it's an open source. So it actually got me thinking about, that's actually kind of interesting, because Orgzilla is great. It's almost perfect, except for how it displays the org tables, because org has this really cool feature where you could do text-based tables, like automatic tables. So if I just do, your pipes and then do text and then hit tab, it automatically starts doing table cells and table rows, and it's magic, and it's built right into the editor. But the downside about it is when I view it on the Orgzilla app is that it's not rendering correctly, because if you ever take like an HTML or text table and then you don't have enough width to show it, and then it starts to kind of do some weird word wrapping, line wrapping. That's the way it's appearing on on my phone. So I'm like, because I was starting to use tables a lot for just normally what I would use Google spreadsheets for just kind of keeping track of certain lists that works best in a table, column, row format. I was starting to do that now in my org notebooks, just making tables. But then if I view them on the phone, it's not rendering out, it's not pretty, and it's not really maintainable. So I thought it would be kind of interesting. I thought, okay, if I had some time, might not be able to time right now, but maybe over the summer, I'd actually take a look, see how those are being rendered. I think it's just being rendered straight as text, and then just wrapping it within that view. It's probably not being do much work, but I wonder if there's some way either you could use an Android component, render it in sort of like a table that'd be more compatible for that display. But it would take some work. But now that it is an open source application, that's something I could do. And it got me thinking about I actually would be more open to installing more apps on my phone and not just use my secured Brave browser to give me most of my functionality on my phone, but to use more apps if they were open source. So I was wondering, have you had any experience dealing with open source native applications? I'm using them on your phone?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe some of the SSH apps that I've had on my phone are technically open source, but then packaged up, The
only other one I can remember using was the GitHub mobile client. I think they always said,
is that open source?
Yeah, that's open source.
Open source, yeah.
So that's the only other application I remember for being purely open source, where you could actually go to a GitHub repo and see the code, and also if you wanted to submit commits to it, you could, but or pull requests. So I was curious, is there anything else? Because I think that could be an interesting avenue for developers who, for just releasing kind of functional applications that, maybe not intend to make a lot of money. But I was also thinking that this could actually be a cool business model in the future, because, down the road, like we talked about, version 10 or 11 of this podcast when we can actually get the us hooked up to the Lightning Network, so we can actually do the boostograms and do the stats and start to for people to start sending us some little bit of Bitcoin once we build an audience too. But I was trying to think about, that model is kind of interesting how, when we would publish a show, we were hooked up to the Lightning Network to accept those types of transactions through different podcast apps, that we could set up distributions of those donations. So we could say like, okay, so if we had like a guest, or between you and me, we could do like 50-50. Or if we had a guest, we want to give him a third of the revenue from that show, we could automatically split. So once that donation comes in, it automatically gets split up and then gets sent off to the wallet of whoever's owning that. So from an open source standpoint, if there was a service like that for open source applications, where for the maintainers of that, so it's like if you actively push updates or maintain it or documentation, whatever role you have within the project, and then if people want to donate to the project, that automatically get distributed to the maintainers. What do you think about that?
So yeah, okay. I think I follow me. So the proceeds from the application, whatever you make, if it's a paid application in the Play Store or something like that.
Yeah, because I've never maintained an open source project, especially I've never been involved in one where it's very large, where they're accepting donations. I don't have any idea behind the scenes how they may distribute that, what they use the funds for. I know mostly it's for hosting and for other other costs, but it would be I think it might encourage more open source development if there could be an easy revenue stream. So if you just had your Bitcoin wallet, right, your crypto wallet, you put in the address as you subscribe to a project, a maintainer of the project, or just an active supporter of that project in some way, you would have to get approved and make sure that within the whoever's going to be managing the project. But once you're approved, then if you're submitting updates on a regular basis, so you're an active maintainer of it or just active supporter of it, then getting some revenue from it, like automatically, not even thinking about it, just comes in.
I mean, I don't know if something like that exists. My understanding of a lot of open source stuff is there's far less concern about figuring out how to split up whatever the donations are, because there's far more of just like, could people please donate? Could they maybe donate?
You said that just not enough activity in the donation sphere to require such action.
And I think a lot of your larger open source projects, their like the way that they support it, however they're being supported, is either maybe it's through donations. Like I know there's a new with some changes in the PHP world. There's a PHP Foundation, and a lot of companies are throwing a decent amount of donations to the foundation to then hire. It's not to be split across maintainers, but to hire developers to be full-time contributor or contribute. I don't know if they're full-time, but to be the devs that are managing the core of the language.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of other open source projects get to the point where, okay, if you're big enough and you're a large organization that is relying on this software, then there's support contracts, things like that result in, okay, that's how we get, that's how we fund the project, and that's how we pay for personnel, is because not through licensing fees, but through things like support contracts and things like that. But yeah, I think the bigger problems, my understanding is the bigger problems to solve in terms of open source funding is just the funding, not how to more efficiently disperse it.
I know for web services or websites, and that would be one issue. But going back to the App Store, the Google Play Store or the iOS App Store, I know they take 30% of the cut from apps, and that's actually what Epic Game is fighting with Apple right now because of their Fortnite revenue, and they want to protect that as much as possible, and they want to be able to provide their own payment within the App Store. But thinking about like if an app costs $1, $5, $10, I would easily pay $10 or $20 for this Orgzilla application, because I think it's so cool, even though it's so simple, but it provides so much function to my workflow. As a developer, I would definitely pay a certain amount of money. I'd probably not pay maybe $50 or $100 for it, but there would be the number to pay for it. And then what if that number could automatically then get distributed to whoever's maintaining the project? Not just the one person who's building the application, but the person who actually are submitting updates to it.
Yeah. And I've can you contribute? to that project? Because
that's a good point. I took a look at the code.
Like,
I'm sure I didn't. Yeah, I didn't see the donate function on the website. I have to double check that. But I bet to the GitHub project on GitHub, and it looks pretty good.
Oh, not the Orgzilla, but the actual
good point
org itself.
Orgzilly. You know, in every startup would have you just have to make it a startup, just do an LOI at the end.
Yeah. Oh, is that what it is?
Yeah.
Orgzilly. Okay. But yeah, there's applications I've talked about Synergy in the past, and that was open source, and now is kind of a bit of both.
No, it's interesting. I go to the website real quick. They don't have anything about donations. They have a good amount of if you want to help us localize Orgzilla, support. No, they're not look for any funding at all. Interesting too. They also deploy Orgzilla on the FDroid App Store. Mm-hmm. Have you ever used that before?
Yeah. If you have a phone that you're not connecting to a Google account.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And you're just kind of doing a vanilla Android install, and if you don't have a Google account on the phone, like I have a device that it's an old phone. We use it as kind of a baby monitor, so it's better for it not to be synced to me or my wife, our Google accounts, because you don't want that to be getting all the messages in the world.
Can you install FDroid on top of?
Yeah, you can. You can install as an APAC phone. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the nice part of Android, right? You can just grab an APAC and tell it to install it, and as long as you hit the button that says, "Hey, I know could be doing something terrible," they'll let you do it. And so FDroid is like a Google Play Marketplace that doesn't require you to have signed into your Google account. So if you're trying to build kind of a Android device that doesn't have the awareness of Google, you can use FDroid for that, I think. If I'm not mistaken, that's what that app store is. Also install the Amazon App Store, which is its own separate crazy thing. And speaking of Epic, that's why you can't buy a book from the Amazon Kindle app. You have to go to the website and do it.
Through Amazon, you mean? Through the Kindle? Yeah.
Yeah, you can't go through the iOS app and buy a book. You would have
that's
to
super
open
annoying.
up Safari, go to Amazon, find the book, buy it in your Amazon account that you've signed into online, just so you don't have to give the 30% of an in-app payment to Apple.
Oh, those big companies got to get paid somehow, Tim.
Yeah. Because it's not enough to charge you like $1,000 for a phone that I forget what it costs to make, and I don't think we know what it costs to make because they dropped their lawsuit, or when they were suing somebody for rounded corners, and they're like, because someone else rounded a corner, we've lost so much of our revenue, and the judge was like, that's cool. But since you're saying you lost so much revenue, could you give me an idea of what your profit for an iPhone is? And Apple's like, I'm sorry, now you want to know what? No, I want to know how much there's a difference between the $1,000 you charge your users and the measly amount of money you pay the people that build this for you. And Apple's like, you know what, this isn't really important. I'm sorry, what?
That's so funny. I too vaguely remember those early lawsuits. That was when Steve Jobs was still around, when OS 10, first couple of years out of OS 10, and then other people started to try to emulate it.
Yeah.
And they were like, no, don't copy our user interface. It's proprietary.
But I mean, they were like, we patented a rectangle with not pointy edges. You can't do a rectangle without a pointy edge. You know that, right? You mean like a kind of a circle-y thing, but not quite that it's oblong.
See, that's why I think, man, Apple could have. I mentioned that Pop OS, man. They're treading some deep and water there with like they are their dock OS 10.
They have a dock. Oh no, no one's ever thought of that before.
So how was your week with your job? Did you do any interviews, Tim? I don't know how much you can talk about this.
That sounds so scripted. I was going to say I really wanted to explore how you got Emacs to run faster on Windows, because I did a real quick look, and Google search trends says that less than no one is searching for optimizing Emacs on Windows.
Hey, I'm a developer.
It's a negative trend. Yeah.
If I need to, I can figure things out myself. But I did.
So how did you? But I'm curious. How did you get Emacs to run faster?
Doom Emacs has a really cool feature with their the init. They have like a configuration file. Their init configuration file, which it gives you a list of like, I don't know how many. It's like 100 different modules, plugins that are made for Emacs, and they easily, if you just uncomment them and then sync, you do like your Doom sync, which basically rebuilds Emacs with the libraries, then it's automatic. So what I was doing, I was going through demo one, just double checking stuff. Okay, I really don't need that. But then also stuff I wasn't sure about, just digging in, like going to the website of these libraries and just seeing what their support is or what they say from Windows and Mac. And just a couple I removed. I can't remember which ones I removed because there was like probably about 5 to 10 that I removed from it and then rebuilt it a couple times. And then did see found now still is a little, like I said, it's still faster on Linux. You know, and I'll probably be dual booting or going Linux by the summertime because just because of Emacs.
So exciting. Right? I love this. I love everything you're saying.
So, but
this is the year, folks. This is the year of Linux on the desktop.
On Mark's desktop. Yeah,
20, that's right. On Mark's desktop.
So like I said, it's still a little slow starting up. It was a little bit faster, but what I found though, just using it, once it starts up and you just be patient with it and then wait for like, 10 seconds after it just kind of loads everything in behind the scenes, then it's actually totally fine. It's totally usable. It's a lot better when I'm editing the files. There's no delay. It seems to be perfect. But like I said, on Linux though, if I boot it up, run it, it's fast automatically.
Just so much faster.
So it is what it is.
And
but it's more usable.
I had that same issue when before I got the desktop, I had a laptop that I actually had 3 screens running off the laptop. I had to close the lid because I couldn't have the laptop screen also running. It was just like too much. Mm-hmm. Because to get 3 screens, like there's the HDMI out of the laptop, and the other 2 were the display link USB to HDMI things that push a lot of that display computation to the processor. And I would have those issues. My IDE was slow. I would type and it'd be like, I'm waiting for autocomplete to catch. And it was so frustrating. So I understand that.
Most of the slowness, I did turn off that. Okay, now you remind me. There is there's like autocomplete function. I believe it was I should be looking at the library now to remember it. There was a couple autocomplete libraries I turned off. Okay. That immediately just because they were like they had this autocomplete library that would try to autocomplete if I was just typing because I mostly was using it for my notebooks and type some notes. If I would just type a normal sentence or paragraph or whatever, it would try to autocomplete almost every word. Like it would look. Say I was starting. If I went to type a game, I typed in GA, it would just immediately pop up a bunch of different words that started with GA. And I was like, wait, I don't need
like
this.
Dictionary autocomplete?
Yeah, it was very weird. And then maybe if I dig in the settings, I could set the autocomplete to only work on specific code files like extensions. So I say, okay, if I'm in this file here, then run. But if I'm just in my org file, which is basically a text file that just has normal text, don't run at all. If I took a little more time of work, I probably figured that part out. But I just removed it. That dramatically increased the time. Just the normal editing, because doing the autocomplete behind the scenes, but also the update of the interface, it takes time. I understand that. So it's like I don't know. Yeah, it's like I love autocomplete when it's smart. That's why I need better AI, artificial intelligence autocomplete to only pop up when you absolutely need it. Because when it pops up all the time, it's kind of
And So I don't know if mine was actually the autocomplete as much as it was. It just seemed like it visually seemed like things like that were lagging whenever there's interaction because it was doing so much draws to the screen. Yeah, and it couldn't. It just couldn't handle that. But that was because I was using, a slightly older laptop with three displays attached to it. But I have no lag in my IDE on my current setup, which is nice. But
it's PHP Storm, right?
Yeah,
it's the gold. It's the gold standard of
apparently,
PHP editing.
Yeah. At least you know what it is now, because I think up until this point, every time you've been like, "What was that editor that you used? I forget what it was. I don't know. Is it a JetBrains thing?" So, but yeah.
As long as it has a Vib mode, then I'm in support of it. So.
It does. I don't use it, but it does. It does. Hey, did you ever use? You never use it for C# stuff, did you? Because they have ReSharper and a whole set of C# IDEs.
I never used it seriously, but I do remember there was one time when I was back in the Visual Studio days, I did try it. I tried it because I was curious. I was curious about what it was like and how it differed from Visual Studio. So I tried it. It was okay, but I didn't. But that was that was a long time ago. So I have no idea what's like now, and comparing it to what would it offer from a C# perspective. I guess if you were doing ASP.NET, or mostly just doing
instead of Visual Studio.
Yeah, instead of doing is that I don't know why people would use it? Because if you're going to be building a Windows application, I would just use Visual Studio. So I'm not sure what PHP or what what's the name of that for their C# editor? Is it not PHP Storm? What is it?
I think it's I want to say it's ReSharp. But
so I could totally see the purpose if you are a web service developer building on ASP.NET. I think that could definitely probably have some nice features maybe.
Yeah, but I don't think that's. I think they're. I don't know. I don't know who their target audience is there. I'm looking at it right now. There's Rider, which is a cross-platform .NET IDE.
Okay, I don't know anything about that.
And then, and I'm also limited what I'm looking at. That I can run on my Linux box.
Oh, so to do .NET development on Linux.
That makes sense. to do that any, it's cross-platform.
You could use like your Mono. I guess they still do like Mono. Is it still called Mono? Like the .NET version that runs on Linux.
I think so. I've never done that. Back in the day.
Xamarin got bought out by Microsoft, and I don't know if they folded in Mono and then just branded it as .NET on Linux. I don't know if they did that or not,
but yeah. So on Windows, I can install Rider, which is the cross-platform .NET IDE again. And then I can also do ReSharp, which is Visual Studio Extensions. So I'm not sure what that does. And then they got .peak and .memory, which is a decompiler and a memory profiler and a performance profiler. Looks like all the things, but I can only install those on Windows.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, so, like I said, I used it really super early on. But like I said, it was if you're used to, you know what, honestly, if the audience is, you ask who's this for, it probably is developers like you who are used to using their IDEs.
Could be, yeah.
And want a nice, easy kind of transition to a similar IDE but programming on a different platform. That's probably for them. Rather than because if you're in the Microsoft camp and if you use Visual Studio forever, I don't know why you would switch off that. Unless you have a really low power computer that I could totally understand.
I'm looking here, and they have the ReSharper stuff, which is supposed to work with Visual Studio users. So I think it's some of their tooling to put inside,
built into it,
into Video Studio. But yeah, I'm looking at what they have for Rider, and they're talking about like Xamarin. Let's see, Unity, Unreal. So yeah, it feels like it may be for a developer who's not .NET as much as like we're gonna have to write it in that, not my first language.
No, I can totally understand.
Yeah. Cross-platform, mono-based projects, all that kind of fun stuff. So, and then plus, like if it's me, if you want me to write something in .NET, I mean, my development system isn't Windows, so I'm not gonna be able to. Well, I probably can run Visual Studio on Windows, can I?
It's meant to run on Windows. What do you mean?
Sorry. I probably can run Visual. Yeah, you're right. Hopefully, it runs on Windows.
You can run Visual
Studio on Linux, though, right?
Visual Studio Code, I know you can.
That's VS Code, yeah, but
I don't know full Visual Studio. They've jumped to there, which would be cool if they did that, but I don't think because so much of that is built on the Windows the Windows libraries for their can't remember the name for it for the display libraries. So I don't know, for them to make that translation to go to Linux would probably be a big deal. I don't know why they would do that. Unless Linux is the future of Microsoft, which that could be an interesting, like we talked about last week, how if they release their Game Pass and start releasing games on Linux and open the door for that, I could see them, why not? Why not make Linux on everything? I'm for that.
Well, yeah, apparently.
As long as it's pretty and fun to use and it's accessible. Accessibility is big for me, especially as I get older. So,
wait, by accessible, you mean you can zoom in? You can make the font bigger? Is that what you're talking about?
Well, no, hey, I love the tiling feature on Pop OS.
You mentioned that.
Along with Emacs, changing my life. The auto tiling feature of Pop OS is also on my laptop. That's why over the summertime I probably definitely do the dual books. I'm curious on my two big screens, which basically I split up. I use the Windows tiling feature and I like it, but I basically just split up 50% on each monitor, so I could run like basically 4 windows at a time, and then I could resize them if I need to. But I have to use the shortcut keys to do it, to kind of like move the windows back and forth into the slots where they're at. But I'm curious, if I had Pop OS running on multiple screens, big screens, and with the auto tiling feature, would it just do it? Remember, how well would it work? So, because I do think auto tiling and the responsiveness of the user interface, and I've talked about how, I believe artificial intelligence, machine learning is going to be a big deal when it comes to design and user interface kind of layout and presentation. So we can have user interfaces that adapt to the way the user uses the computer instead of the user having to adapt to the interface. Or I think it'll get reversed as machines learn us better and as machines take over. So I think auto tiling could be a start of that, where since like if the computer could kind of recognize what how I'm arranging my windows over, let's say, learn how I'm doing that, and then just automatically just start doing it and kind of take that task away from me. I think that would be great.
So I don't use auto tiling. I just turned it on, and I've got 3 screens on Pop OS,
Mm-hmm.
and it just automatically, like, based on my windows here, this one screen has 3 tile, this one has
Mm-hmm.
2 left and right, and then as I drag them around, it gives me the options of where else I would want to tile them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know.
So I don't know. I do think it definitely compared the auto tiling.
Would it remember? I don't know. So.
I don't think it. I think there's some settings you could do if you. I don't know, for certain applications. Maybe you could tell them go back to that tile. I think there's something with that. But I want even just a more dynamic system where I don't even want to worry about it. Just like I like the way the auto tiling works on a laptop, where like if I have an application full screen, automatically goes full screen on me. Then if I start up another one, it'll split the view 50-50. And then I could use like the super key with the arrow keys. I can kind of move around. Also, I like how Pop OS does their workspaces. So they have like this nice workspace feature. You could just, if I want to just put like an application in the workspace, it's just basically like 2 keys, and that's just swap it to a different workspace.
I mean, that's GNOME too. But yeah.
So that's a nice feature. So I'm just all these features I really, really love. I just wish they could just be automated, or just learn how I use the computer, and then let's say after a week or month or whatever it is, then it starts to work better and work faster, right?
Yeah.
Same thing. Like
I'm sure you could submit a pull request for that.
A little side story about machine learning with this learning feature. Have you ever used with a Google Nest or these automatic thermostats?
I've not, just because. So when we put in, like, the house that we're in now had baseboard heat, and when we built the addition, we added a normal forced air burner and air conditioning, and a lot more up to date system. But I have 6 zones. So
6 separate zones you can control individually by thermostats.
Right. And the Nests are like $200 a pop or something. That's like, $1,500 for thermostats. Yeah, that seems like a good idea.
Let's save you some money. Don't worry, you're going to save so much money over the year. It'll just make up for it. Don't worry.
Yeah. So no, I don't have those. I don't have learning. I mean, the thermostats I have are smart-ish. I can control them with my phone. I don't even remember what they're called. It's right behind me. It's like a Lux or something like that. I think the company makes them down in Philly.
Really?
But I can control them with my phone, and I think if I put geolocation on my phone, like when I leave the house, it'd be like, oh, I can turn it down. The problem is me leaving the house is meaningless. There's like 12 people that live here, right? I leave the house. Does my wife leave the house? No. Do my in-laws leave the house? I don't know. Are my kids still here? Who knows? So me leaving the house doesn't really help. But I get the learning features of Nest, where it's like, okay, if you normally wake up and turn it down, it's going to turn it down automatically. You go to bed, and you turn it up a little bit, or you in the summer you turn it down so your room's cooler. That definitely.
That's been an interesting process seeing that, because before the rebuild, we had I think it was like Echo B. It was a digital thermostat. It was more actually it was hooked up to Amazon very lightly, but didn't really have any big connections.
You could just control it. You could be like,
hey, you could talk to Alexa if you wanted to through it or something like that. Alexa could listen to you and know what you're doing in the house. I don't know. But we use that, but I mostly use it for the auto scheduling. So that had a nice feature where I could just digitally with an app, just auto schedule it. So for certain times, adjust the temperature here and there. So the Nest, I don't think it's weird. I keep looking for the schedule. I think they do have it somewhere, but it's always tough to find because they want you to put it in learning mode and learn how you do it. And I was always skeptical about going this way with the stress, because me, I don't have any apps on my phone because I don't want these apps to like listen to me. No, why would I want an artificial robot eye in my house listening and watching and detecting everything that I do, which it probably is. But I'm like, I don't know. I want to stay warm and cool, and I don't really want to worry about it. So I'm giving that up. But that's why I think the robots will eventually take over. But the learning part of the thermostat has been interesting. We're like, it's actually been a little bit of a trial where like my wife's been frustrated. We're like, we'll go the thermostat will just change itself automatically, not drastically, but just a few degrees, positive or negative, in weird chaotic times. So I was telling, just be patient with it, because what I read about it, it takes some time just to learn it. You
can actually learn your patterns. Yeah.
Yes. So now, because we usually do, let's say at night we'll turn it like 66 or 60, below that, we want to turn it down, then, and then maybe try and turn up to like 69 or 70, like, during the day, during the wintertime, and for the heat to come on. So we want like a variation within, so a range between like 66 or 72, whatever the numbers are. And so we were kind of mainly setting that. Now it's finally started to work, where now it's doing it automatically. So you can see how it goes down to like 66 at night, and then it goes back up, it goes up like to 67, 68, but then it'll adjust it a couple degrees during the day. So you can see, it's interesting to see how it's changing. Actually, it's gotten easier. So it's taken much longer I thought it would. I thought it would only take like, a week to 2 weeks, but it's taken probably about over a month for actually start to feel like it's actually working now.
Now it feels like it's making some decisions that you would
it's making better. It's making better choices.
Patterns.
Yes, the machine is making better choices for me.
Do you know? Yeah. Do you know if it what other data it brings in? Because I don't know if it's my thermostats aren't great. I don't know if it's my heating system's not great. I mean, I know some of it's not because I still have to insulate the garage, and I know I have heat issues in terms of where the heat load goes and things like that. But one temperature will be fine when it's a temperature outside. But I actually want it either warmer or cooler depending on the outside temperature. Like 68 throughout the house is great in the summer, but it's terrible in the winter. Well, like the thermostat should be keeping it there. It's just like I just want it to be warmer in the winter because I think the environment is cold or something. I don't understand exactly how that all works, but
since Google requires us in order to use a Nest to put in our address, and it's
probably measuring,
tracking the weather, the temperature around that area, just with the services that it uses, and then it's comparing that data with how we set the temperature inside compared to the temperature outside. So it should be doing that automatically.
Yeah,
just because it knows where we're at. Also, it's connected with it's pinging Google probably how many times, so it knows the exact location where it's at. Which is, like I said, that's just something that it dragged my feet about doing. But since we did the house rebuild, I was like, yeah, why not? It's just, why not do it? Because I tried to make the house as techy as possible with rewiring the whole house. And I was like, all right, let's put a smart thermostat. The remote smart thermostat is actually really nice with the Google Nest. I like that to see me much better. With the Echo Beat, it was kind of flaky. But now it's super nice. Where like I can't put that in the schedule. I say, okay, during the day, use the downstairs thermostat, but then at nighttime, use the upstairs thermostat.
Switch and that's great for you because you have like one zone, right?
Yeah. No, basically, yeah.
But you can
central
act
air.
You can act if it's two zones because you put the remote one and say just sense, use this as my sensor instead of that as my sensor. Which was nice too because I could see that like if I could buy it that way, I could have done Google Nest without it costing a fortune. Yeah. But that's not what those things are designed for. Those things don't actually control. They just it's really for because you said you're still using like a baseboard style. No. It's all forced. It's all forced air.
But
I have 6 separate zones.
So it's this forced air one through one central unit, but then how does it get distributed? But it's still distributed through the system of your house. But how you mean? But
there's still 6 zones.
So the zones. How do the zones control? Does it automatically turn down the vent?
I'm gonna blow your mind with air conditioning and heating technology that's been around since I don't know when. No, there's a little compressor type thing. Like it's an air compressor thing that sits by my unit. And if the zone says I need heat, then it pressurizes a line. I mean, this is more detail than you need, but it's really cool how it mechanically works, right? It pressurizes a line that takes a baffle in the, just for those zones and opens up the baffle.
Oh, so it's just like a switch.
Yeah,
it's just opening up. Okay, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, but for each zone just opens up the baffles for its output. So if
that's smart. That's something that the contractor we work with, like they did give us a nice unit, and it replaced. We had the whole furnace and everything replaced. It is a nice unit. It does work much better than the previous version of the house does. But that would be one thing about having, and we did talk about that. About the fact that the upstairs is never felt either as cool or hot or
right.
It was just not right. But now this has a much more powerful system. So what I've done just to control it, all the vents, and they put a ton of outlet vents everywhere. I sealed them as much as possible in areas I do not want them to have, and then that just fixed the issue. I pushed most of the air upstairs.
Oh, and it just kind of comes down.
Fine. Yeah, it's just fine. Yeah. So. But it's interesting. So, like I said, I think these AI learning how we live and work is kind of an interesting kind of balance of like how much information we give them in order for us to be more comfortable, for us to kind of live easier and better. And I don't know, it's a trade-off, but I think each year, like I said, each year as I get older and older, closer to death, then I don't know, I stop caring as much. So.
Well, and so on that kind of topic, Musk had said something about that recently, where people are prototyping like, oh, this would be a much better dashboard UI for the Tesla because then people could change this input and that, and they could change the temperature, and if they want, if they want to, turn up the fans and all that. And his response was basically, pretty much any user input is error.
Yeah.
So I want the car just to, if you need to tell which maybe, but also no, because sometimes, like, how does the car know I want it to feel warmer today? How
you just say, "Hey, car, make me feel better."
Yeah. But I mean, that's where like that's the point of the Nest is so once it understands what you want, you don't have to keep giving it that input, because when you say turn it up a degree, what you're really saying is it's cold outside, right?
Mm-hmm.
I want it to be a little warmer inside because it's outside.
Yeah.
I actually don't want it to be warmer, but relatively speaking, that's how I feel the same comfort level. And so your input in that case is not quite, we're asking for temperature, but that's not what we care about. What we care about is, are you comfortable? And I get the direction there, but still sometimes you just want to control stuff and not let a machine do it all. So
well, thinking about Musk, I actually did see an interesting article. Did you see the article this week about? He was doing some tweets. I didn't see all his tweets because actually,
he was doing some tweets.
I tried to take a Twitter break this week because I was starting. You probably seen this from me because Twitter's probably the only social network I still use. But then occasionally, once I start seeing a lot of news stories, I start to get don't agree with. I get frustrated, especially how we're beating the war drums right now and on the other side of the world, and that's really starting to make me upset. So I start to get a little bit more antagonistic and jokey. You should live
my life. Pretty much anybody on Twitter, everybody on Twitter is in opposition to my view, even if they're like, even though they're in opposition to each other. I recognize I was starting to do it near the end of the week. I was like, all right, I gotta step back from this. So like during the week, I'm not touched Twitter except for I just the other day. I was like, well, because I do my show prep, and I was like, oh, let me get on Twitter yesterday, so I did that. And then I saw people were talking about that Musk was doing like a tweet storm again, which he usually does every 3 months. He gets on Twitter and he does like a big stream. He does it all the time. No, I think he's kind of like me too, in a sense where he knows like he does a big stream of thought and he gets in trouble for it, and then he kind of goes away. Then does he really?
He kind of comes back. I think he does it, but there's occasionally he'll just do like a bunch of tweets, and like one of them, I guess, or a series one it was mostly about he just made the announcement was about how, because it was a bunch of range of things, but one thing he started talking about how that Tesla was going over the next 2 years was going to focus less on cars and more on robots. On those more humanoid style robots.
Like the humanoid that he marched out a couple, like half a year ago, and is like, in a year, this is going to be your babysitter.
Yep. Okay. So apparently he's like touting he has the best AI, and he feels that it's almost ready to be put into a robot.
Everything I've heard about code quality and anything coming out of Tesla in terms of software has not necessarily been good.
Well, but you got to admit, from what they did with, even though autopilot's not perfect and it has caused a couple of accidents, it's still what he's done and pushed that industry forward in regarding to.
I'm not arguing about that. I'm just like saying, I think there's issues in their software. Like I think I feel like anybody who's looked at it been like, it's a little concerning, but yeah.
Well, I don't know anything. I don't know anything about that except that it's written in primarily C. We talked about that. They write most everything in C directly to the hardware. But just interesting thing about his view about AI, and then I also saw like last week or a couple weeks ago about the fact that I guess they're going to start doing tests with humans on his chip. He's going to put into people's brains to get hooked up to their app. Right. Have you seen about that?
Nothing can go wrong with that. I know I've seen headlines. I haven't followed it at any length.
If you go, just
crazy thing they're trying to do.
The technology is actually pretty fascinating. How it's actually going to connect. They do like a very, very tiny, dot they drill into your skull.
Oh well, as long as it's a tiny hole in my skull.
And the threads of it's like a little dot or a little like metal receptor, and then these tiny microscopic hair threads come out from a bunch of them, and apparently. Like there's going to be a machine. Eventually, they'll be automatic. So remember in sci-fi movies where you have like the device and it just kind of like has these little tentacles that automatically go in. It
goes right into your brain and
going to happen eventually.
Sucks your brain. Yeah.
So apparently they have this, but they have the robot machine that's going to automatically do it and place these receptors on certain points in your brain. So I think it's kind of interesting. They're going to start doing human trials, I guess, within the next year. So it's kind of interesting how the first people are going to get chipped. But think about that. At what point would you accept a chip in your body? Would you ever get chipped?
Can I go with never? Can I go? I mean, well, okay.
Tim, so that's
too big of a question.
What if you build your own API with the data that's coming out of your body?
Yeah, I'm still not sure about that. But I mean, like when you talk about biotechnology, we've got pacemakers in people. That's a chip. There's technology in that that's keeping their heart beating. We're doing
your
stuff
brain,
like that.
To your brain,
That's a different thing. Yeah. I don't know. But Yeah, I don't know.
Well, I'm definitely not going to be in line to.
You're not signing up for this. You're not like drill a tiny hole
definitely
in my
not
head?
version 1. Maybe
No?
maybe version 3 or 4. We'll see.
3 or 4. Okay.
Well, like Windows 3.1, right? Stuff gets good by then, so yeah.
Right.
Maybe the same thing could be when it comes to chipping brains.
Maybe. Maybe.
So I thought about that because I was thinking about you. Like, would you ever do? I think eventually, if it provides me some type of health benefit, like if you could actually get to the point where it actually, so I do feel this, like eventually we'll get to the point where either if it's like nanotechnology, which could go in our body and reprogram or repair certain parts of our body. So, especially with cancer, terminal illnesses. And I think if there was an added physical health benefit to it, could make me live a little bit longer and could, make, or just be healthier, then I would probably do it. Once it's past the initial beta tests, I would.
Nanobots are interesting. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But you say you're interested in like whether I would like, what am I, some special?
Well, have you ever thought about that? At one point in the
population?
future, could you ever see yourself doing that, like projecting yourself into the future and think about, okay, at what point would there be a benefit you see if the technology did this, then you would then accept it into your life?
I mean, the whole drill a hole in your head and let a computer be messing with your brain thing. That's a jump. That's a jump.
It is.
Even if it's observational. But I think it was Google that had the contacts that would do telemetry on you from your eye, basically measuring different things that it could that way.
From a medical perspective.
Yeah,
like,
and that's it's like I forget what telemetry they could pull out of that. But, so a contact in your eye, what about the Fitbit on your wrist? And, again, pacemaker does exactly the same thing. My dad had a stroke and they put in something in him that would kind of monitor his telemetry and kind of show if there's anything as signs of a stroke, or if the stroke happened again.
Yeah.
What would happen. My daughter had some issues where they had to put something that did the same thing. It recorded her heart rhythms, and if she had something that felt like she felt lightheaded or something like that, she'd press a button, and I think it would capture the data so they could analyze it and see what's going on. Is there anything out of normal, or is this just something that seems to be a syndrome that affects people of this age and gender? So all that stuff, yeah. But there's really blurry lines there when you're thinking about how much am I seeding control, or how much danger is there in this? And because we do it externally, we do it somewhat internally, and a bunch of good questions here.
Well, it's interesting that, Musk is driving the human AI interface because he believes that eventually the AI machines will take over in some way. They will, whether or not we like it or not. There's going to be some type of evolution. It could be fast or it could be slow, but over the next, let's say 10 years or so, something's going to happen where it's going to be a point where we have to make a choice of how much do we integrate with it or fight against it? Because it's just going to happen. Just industry is just going to push that along. So his bet is the fact of like, if humans can integrate with technology and kind of go more, be in pair with it, then we can kind of bring almost humans up to the technology level. We'll be in a better place as a society.
I mean, there's that whole thing, are we expecting machines to become sentient, all that kind of fun stuff, which is a different conversation. And if you watch my TED talk or my TEDx talk, whatever you want to call it, you'll see what I think on that. But
how many TEDx talks have you done? Only one or two?
Just the one. But it covers such a range of things.
You know what? I must not have made it through the whole talk because I remember the beginning you were talking.
You watched the first 2 minutes, which was nothing but nothing.
Because I wasn't part of the TED talk, Tim. So why did I need to watch it, right?
Why were you? That's very true. That's very true. I should have invited. I just going to invite my friend Mark here on stage, so he'll watch this later. Okay, thank you, Mark.
At least just introduce me. Let me pop my head up there, right?
Yeah.
No,
no. But I talked about you a lot at the end.
For the first part, you said about not Dev Fry. No, you're not talking about Dev Fry. You're projecting now. No, but the first part was about co-working, about remote working, right? And
not really. No.
Yes, you did.
No.
Oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to go watch.
You're gonna have to go watch it.
Again.
Yeah.
I will reference a specific moment when you talked about yourself as being a remote working.
Oh, yes. That. Okay. If you're saying I gave the context of the fact that I work from, work remotely, yes, I think I mentioned that in passing.
We talked about it for a little bit, like maybe 5 minutes. I'll give you 5 minutes. And then
okay, so here's the thing about TEDx talks or TED Talks or whatever. TED Talks they are a maximum of 18 minutes long, because the thought is once you reach 18 minutes, no one's listening anymore.
True.
Which is why we're 54 minutes in this podcast and we have zero.
That's a
listeners.
good argument. I should tell the administration
Zero.
I should not lecture past 18 minutes.
There you go. Ted says it.
Yeah.
But that's the minimum. And if you watch TEDx talks, a lot of them hit that point. I have a slightly different perspective on things. If there's a point that I want to make, or a story I want to tell, or something I want to convey, the only thing that matters really is conveying that. You don't have to pad it to convey it more, to make it seem like you've conveyed it more. So you say, maybe I spoke 5 minutes about being a coworker. For sure not, because the entire TEDx talk is only 8 minutes long.
Oh, so you took only 8 minutes of the 18.
Yeah.
And I checked out. I think I must have checked out after 2 then.
You must have been like, I'm done. I'm done. I think it's only 8 minutes. I have to look at the time.
Okay. I'm gonna put this on my org agenda list to rewatch
and then once
Tim's
it's in the
TEDx talk.
Once it's
and
in
I'm
the
gonna
org
report
agenda.
back next week.
Yeah.
About
once it's
what
in the org agenda.
Yeah.
Then we definitely are gonna do it.
Hey, it's changed my life. So. So we did talk
next week on the Emacs podcast with Mark and
maybe next week we can talk about you doing some tech interviews.
We talked about talking about that last week, and then I even titled this episode. Technically, this is an interview, and we didn't talk about it.
This normally happens to us. This normally happens to us, but eventually, want to get into because Tim, I need you to give me some tips because we talked about in a couple of years or 1 or 2 years.
Right,
you're going to be looking for a job, so I need some guidance. I need some help, some support.
So we've got 4 minutes left. No, but basically, like you said, I had to do 3 technical interviews last week with senior developers. So my philosophy, as I kind of boiled down those 3 interviews, summarized them, and gave them to the rest of the group that's responsible for doing hiring, is I ask questions, not like those whiteboard questions, but questions that were designed to say, do they understand the concepts that are important to being a developer in general? And if you can communicate those concepts, you then understand them. So can they communicate? So it wasn't like, fill in the blank on this code or write me the FizzBuzz example. It's talk to me about this concept. Just talk to me about it.
So you put more weight on the actual communication of the developer. Not how they answer, how they kind of respond or kind of work through a question or problem.
There's truth. Yeah, there's truth to that too, and that's important. But what I'm looking for is I'm just going to bring up some topics for software development in general. Some either patterns or concepts that we talk about. And maybe we'll talk about this next week because we are running out of time here.
Well, I'm at least glad that we can at least briefly talk about it, so it keeps us true to the show title just a little bit.
Yeah,
right?
If you listen all the way to the end, which we know nobody's going to listen to more than 18 minutes, but if you listen all the way to the end, you'll see this. But so it's like if I ask you a question about some software development concept, and you have a really hard time either answering or just expressing it, and it's not like it's not a gotcha question. And without asking one of my questions, it's hard to even give this an example.
Because and also you're looking for senior developers
because you're a Python developer, right?
Yes,
you do Python stuff. So
more
if I said to you,
now, but okay.
Well, okay, but this does not apply to JavaScript. But if I said to you, Mark, and this is a good one because we'll give this question. I think the bumper music's starting. We'll give this question and then there it is. We'll give this question and this will maybe hold over for next week. If I said to you, we have interfaces, we have abstract classes, and I don't think Python has the concept of traits, but Python does have the concept of multiple inheritance. You did Ruby in the past. Ruby has the concept of mix-ins.
Yes.
PHP calls something very similar to that a trait. So if I said to you just this, this is not a oh, I'm going to give you some trick question, give me the right answer. Interfaces, abstract classes, traits. How would you tell me what the difference is between those 3 things?
How do you tell me what the differences are?
No, I'm just saying that would be
without showing you the code.
Right. No, just
so you probably
what's the difference between an interface and an abstract class?
So you probably would have to go through different situations that I would have to come with that in mind and say, okay, I would use this abstract class in this case, this interface for this purpose, and walk through
not just like
different examples.
But what are the differences? Like if I don't understand what they are, if I come to you and say, I see an interface and abstract class, what's the difference? Can you even just explain that to me? And it's not so much about communication, but if you have a hard time taking some of these concepts and talking about them, it tells me you don't think about them a lot. And if you don't think about them a lot, these are the things that as a developer you should be thinking of as you write code.
Well, because
so
like
those
I
are
said,
the questions I asked.
and you're looking for a senior developer who should have gone through a lot of work already, not just an entry level developer who, might not know or might not provide a good answer to that.
And we'll come back in a week, and Mark will answer that question.
Okay.
And we'll see if I hire him.
That was a good ending. I'll give you that one.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. I'll hit end stream over here.